Oleksandr Alexandrovych, who I'm going to ask to speak for 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm asking that as the first discussant to actually state what he thinks then is the government's position. Alexandr, please. But remember, 3 to 5.
Thank you, Walter. Indeed, it's very hard to speak after such eloquent speakers and before their break. I thank the organizers of this conference, among which there are a lot of my old friends since my diplomatic job in Washington, D.C., for this invitation. It would be indeed only natural to hear the view of the Ukrainian government on this important subject. And I will try to explain one subject that has become a little controversial, to put it mildly, and namely Ukraine's current non-bloc status. I know this term is not popular in this audience, but please bear with me, please keep your minds open. As the name of this panel goes, Ukraine finds itself in a certain strategic framework against which it has to develop its policies. Contrary to popular belief, I would argue that Ukraine's security environment has not changed much in the last 20 years. This environment is not determined by the false dilemma with the Ukraine east or west, and here I fully concur with Damon. We have had certain ups and downs in our relationships with the West or with Russia, but at least we can control or influence these relationships. What Ukraine cannot control, however, is the hate or love relationship between Washington and Brussels on the one hand and Moscow on the other. In that sense, the entire European continent is hostage to this relationship. There are basically 3 ways to mitigate this problem. Countries either join NATO or CSTO, or they try to perform a very delicate balancing act. Ukraine has tried the first 2 options at various times in its modern history with little success. Because as soon as we move closer to one side, the other side does its best to pull us back. Moreover, in their long-standing opposition, the West and Russia always attempt to engage Ukraine on their respective sides, tearing the fabric of European geopolitics and of the Ukrainian society. Hence, and I wish to emphasize the next point, regardless of the genuine or perceived motives for the actual declaration of its non-bloc policy 2 years ago, this move could have been expected for some time. This third option, without pretension to be ideal, has never been seriously explored as a modus operandi. However, it has been brooding in the minds of the Ukrainian politicians and reflecting the minds of many Ukrainian people. In this particular light, the non-bloc policy of Ukraine should be viewed as the consequence of Euro-Atlantic dichotomy rather than the cause of the current regional security environment. Ukraine views its security not as something that can be guaranteed once and forever by one stroke of a pen on any legal document, but as a building with many different bricks and dimensions. I will skip some of the parts. So, having proclaimed its policy of non-membership in any military alliances, Ukraine, in the short and medium perspective, intends to provide for its own security by the following means. First, to continue policy of European integration, including, of course, through internal reforms that would enhance its political, economic, energy, humanitarian, and information security. It can be expressed by a simple yet very persuasive formula. The best guarantee of non-bloc Ukraine's security is its membership in the European Union. Second, maintaining the policy of strategic equilibrium between its key partners and encouraging sustained rapprochement between Russia and the West. I'm not advocating the infamous slogan, "Into Europe together with Moscow." Rather, the pan-European integration should take place on parallel, independent tracks. Applied to NATO, that would mean establishing cooperation in the framework 28+1+1. Third, mitigating the problems of hard security by facilitating the global nuclear disarmament, leading with like-minded Europeans the policy of denuclearization and demilitarization of the continent, in particular by pushing tactical nukes out of the region, reviving CFE, and finding a modus vivendi on missile defense, pursuing confidence-building measures along the perimeter of Ukraine's borders and in the Black Sea area. A more active stance of Ukraine on ESDP, political and military integration with the European Union, Here, the role of NATO is very important since military standards are very similar in both organizations. Last but not least, continuing the distinctive and constructive partnership with NATO, which, by the way, has been more substantial in the last 2 years. To conclude, I would like to stress just three very briefly, but three curious points that have the direct bearing on Ukraine-NATO relationship. First, in many unilateral declarations of NATO on Ukraine, including in official written texts, the alliance expresses its strong support of a sovereign, independent and prosperous Ukraine, its territorial integrity and the inviolability of its borders. It has been mentioned also by many panelists today. It has become almost a cliché for the speeches of the NATO Secretary General and high officials from the member states. We regard these expressions as an implicit commitment to protect Ukraine against possible contingencies. The language is very similar to that in the Budapest Memorandum and presents explicit political assurances of our security. Second, we may not underestimate the enormous normative power of the European Union and NATO, each having its own set of acquis communautaire. In the case of NATO, those are the NASTAC, Smart Defense and Connected Forces concept. The sluggish but unstoppable codification will ensure such a level of integration on the European continent that the issue of membership at some point in future may become irrelevant. And finally, starting from its Lisbon summit, NATO has been slowly but clearly evolving from a purely military alliance into a regional and even global security organization. This transformation may lead to a new situation in Europe, say 15 to 20 years from now. Therefore, I would argue against seeking a permanent neutrality status for Ukraine, but rather keeping all options open. Ukraine in a flux, Ukraine at the edge of two worlds, as it was mentioned by Vlodko today, may turn out to be in a more winning position than Ukraine rigidly attached to any security configuration. I will leave you with that as a food for thought before the break. Thank you, Walter. Thank you.